If anyone would like to ask any questions about Mashiach before we get started, I can't promise to answer all of them. I'll say, yeah, that's a great question. It's worthy of discussion, but we're not going to get to it tonight. I may tell you that. But I am curious to hear what your questions are regarding Mashiach. Mashiach in Hebrew is Messiah in English. So what are some questions that you might have about the Mashiach? Again, you're welcome to, thanks a million. You want to tell Baya she can get on if she wants to? Rifki, Baya. One of the where was I? Yeah, what did you say? Sorry.
My Zoom wasn't working.
Okay. So one of the sorry guys, my mother is sitting across the table from me, and she's also on Zoom at the same time. And my wife came upstairs to bring the charger for my computer, so my computer doesn't die on you. And she's just like remarking on the fact that my mother is both watching me on the computer and live all at the same time.
Stereo.
And kind of wondering why. Yeah, but okay.
I'm going to turn it.
Okay. No, I just did. All right, so we're back. Yeah, so you can ask it different ways. You can ask it by the chat, by saying over here. That's what I was going to tell you. You can ask it right over here. Or you can raise your hand, or you can just talk. It's up to you. Any questions that you might have about Mashiach, I can't promise to ask all of them. Okay, Juliet? Hold on. Juliet, go ahead. What's your question about Mashiach?
I have two, but I don't know if they're very important, so you can decide that. But number one, will he know that he's Mashiach as he's like growing up? And number two, how will he know who's Jewish and who's not? Like how would he know? Is it prophecy or is it something else?
Okay, good. I'll answer those questions right now because I'm probably not going to get to them later. I don't know if he knows that he's Mashiach growing up. I kind of doubt it, initially at least. I doubt he knows it initially. In terms of the second one, you know how there is an aspect of reality that we cannot see? And I'm making up this answer, but I believe it to be true, okay? So you know how there's an aspect of reality that we're not in touch with. For example, there are radio waves in the room in front of you, but you can't see them because you don't have the right perspective. You don't have the right lenses to see them, right? I think we can all agree with that. So there are some people, such as there are stories about the Stipler Gaon. If you've heard of Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky, Rabbi Chaim Kanievsky is one of the Gedolei Yisrael living in Bnei Brak. His father was known as the Stipler Gaon. He was called the Stipler Gaon because he was from a city called Hornesteipel. He would every now and then who thought they were Jewish would go over to him and introduce themselves, and he would be able to tell if they're Jewish or not just by their aura. I don't mean aura of the kind that you might, somebody on Melrose might introduce you to, but there is such a thing as a spiritual aura, and I guess Jews with their neshama versus the non-Jew with their neshama, I guess it's at a different level or it's different. And again, having the right lenses allows a person to be able to sense that kind of a thing. So for Mashiach to know who's Jewish, that's, to me, that's not such a big deal because I think there are people nowadays that can do that kind of a thing. That being said, Mashiach also is going to be the greatest Navi, with the exception, I think, of Moshe. So Nevi'im certainly would have that kind of insight, the greatest prophets. Okay, some of you.
Question: will he be born in Israel or somewhere else?
I don't know. Okay. Some of you ask questions when Mashiach comes. What happens to people who think they're Jewish who are not halachically Jewish? Do they come back? If they're not halachically Jewish, then they're not Jewish. Will they have the opportunity to convert? I'm not sure. Somebody asked me when Mashiach comes, how many people die from intense holiness? I have no idea. I'm not familiar with that, with the concept that people die because of intense holiness, nevertheless. And again, living your life as a Jew versus actually being Jewish are two separate things, right? So I don't know. I'm not sure exactly where your question is coming from. I'm curious to hear more about what you mean. You're welcome to stay on afterwards and we can talk about it. Okay. Yeah, there are different traditions about what family he's going to be born to, or when he's going to be born on Tisha B'Av. Some people have daughters born on Tisha B'Av. They're very disappointed because I guess tradition says Mashiach is going to be a man. Some people are obsessed with Mashiach. I think we know that. Some people are not as obsessed with Mashiach. Well, do we have two Blooms on tonight, or was that Mrs. Bloom? I guess that was Mrs. Is that your husband? No. You don't know who that is? We can't hear you. No. Welcome to Sharon.
It's just me.
Oh, okay.
I just using my computer and my phone at the same time.
Okay.
Sorry.
No worries. Fantastic. Okay. All right. Look, it makes me look good. I have more people on, right? No, I'm just kidding. It makes no difference. I'm happy to teach one person Torah or 1,000 people Torah. The neat thing about Zoom is it really makes no difference if you have an audience of 15 or 16. I think right now I have maybe 20 on this screen, or whether you have an audience of 5,000. I mean, why does it make no difference? Because you're only looking at 5 people, or six brave souls who show me their faces, as opposed to everybody else who is very shy and hides behind, PC's iPad. Again, I have no clue who that is, but I feel comfortable making fun of you. Okay. Yeah, or as my mother says, maybe you're in your pajamas, which is maybe very appropriate that it says it just says the name and not your face. Okay. Those are all the questions you have about Tishbav? About Mashiach? That's it?
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead. How do you pronounce your name?
Nagin.
Okay, go for it.
You didn't even try. I saw that.
Okay.
It's
Go
okay.
ahead.
It's like Nick. Anyway, so my question is, so I know that a lot of people talk about how there's a tradition of there's a certain time that Mashiach is supposed to come,
Mm-hmm.
and we're nearing that time. So my question is that where is that written, and what is, like, first of all, that's one of the questions, like what is the timeline exactly?
Okay.
And then the second question I have is, then I heard that there is something Moshiach ben David and Moshiach ben Yosef. So I want to know what's the difference between the two of them. I have a lot of questions, so I'll start with those two.
Okay, no, those are great questions. Those are really excellent questions. So the first question, Nagin, that you asked was, boy, I'm tired, was in terms of a timeline, right? Okay. Excuse me. So in terms of the timeline, there is a Talmudic teaching that says that the world is going to have 3 periods of 2,000 years. The first period of 2,000 years is known as Tohu Vavohu, which means like emptiness or nothingness. Second period of 2,000 years is known as Torah. And then actually on Shavuos, I did some reading and some learning, and I read about how the 2,000 years of nothingness was actually cut short, okay? Because the Torah was given before the year 2000. And then you have 2,000 years of Mashiach. So basically what that means is you have a 6,000 year cycle, 6,000 years of reality that, according to Jewish tradition, from the time of Adam and Chava and Eve, all the way through until, I'm not sure about including Mashiach or not, but certainly Mashiach must come by the year 6,000, and that comes from the Talmud. The specific teaching I don't have available tonight, but I'm happy to find it and send it to you. Okay, you can text me your email or your number or whatever it is, and I'm happy to send you that information. Okay, what was your second question? I'm sorry, Nagin, remind me.
No worries. So my second question was in terms of there being Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef.
Right.
What's the difference?
There is a tradition about Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben Yosef, where Mashiach ben David is the Mashiach that we know about, and Mashiach ben Yosef is one who plays some important role and then dies. And there's a lot of speculation about who that person either was, maybe already. There's a lot of discussion about it. I don't really know much more about it than what I just shared with you. But that would be the difference between Mashiach ben David and Mashiach ben Yosef. Mashiach ben David is the Messiah, as we refer to like the Mashiach. And then Mashiach ben Yosef is the precursor to him. And some people say that he already came and died. I don't know. Okay? Let's see. All right, so Elisheva wants to know how we can prepare ourselves for Mashiach's arrival. Yeah, and I think that's kind of the most important question. I mean, obviously, the other questions you guys asked are very important, but they're kind of like lahavdil. Are you familiar with that expression, lahavdil? Lahavdil means like to separate between holy and unholy. Okay, so sometimes if we use an analogy that's not really such a holy analogy, we'll say lahavdil, which gives us like, it's like you're not supposed to talk about business on Shabbos, so you say you're not supposed to talk about business on Shabbos, but let's talk about it anyways. That kind of thing. You ever heard of that concept? It's not a halachic concept, by the way, right? You're not really supposed to do that. I think we all know that, right? But the idea is that, so when you say lahavdil, it's like, this is kind of a strange analogy to use, but I'm going to use it anyways just for the moment. So what's the analogy? It's kind of like, if you get excited by like Star Wars or like by fantasy or, or even historical fiction or whatever it might be, it's like, it's very interesting. It's really like, people get really curious about it, right? So some of the questions that we ask about Mashiach, to me, are kind of like in that vein. Now, there's nothing wrong with them, and there's certainly aspects of Torah without question. Of course, there's certainly aspects of Torah because it's all part of our tradition, and it's interesting to know about. But in a way that's kind of more like, just like outside of ourselves. But this question of how can we prepare ourselves for Mashiach's arrival, that to me is a question of like, so what should I do today? Like, let me ask you this. Those of you that get my emails for a while, from the beginning of this whole Corona thing, all the way until Pesach, and then it just became overwhelming, so I did not continue it. I wrote an email every single day to my shul, to the Westwood Kehillah. And the email said, was a refreshing daily thought. And one day I offered the idea that being that like, oh my gosh, everyone is so busy talking about Mashiach because like the world is coming to an end, we're living in a pandemic. We thought the world couldn't get any stranger, right? And then of course everything broke loose over here, right? In Los Angeles. So we thought that, again, the world couldn't get any stranger. And of course, the world has gotten much stranger over the past few days. Like, oh, Mashiach's coming, everyone's talking about it. So actually what I emailed out as a thought-provoking, or I hoped and thought was a thought-provoking idea, was simply this. Let's say I told you Mashiach were to come tomorrow. But let's say, I'll give you 3 weeks, okay? I tell you Mashiach's coming in 3 weeks. What would you do different today because you know Mashiach is coming in 3 weeks? You hear the question? Is that a fair question? Mrs. Bloom, what do you say? If I told you Mashiach is going to come in 3 weeks, what would you do different? I'm putting you on the spot. No, I'm not really. You don't have to.
I don't know. I guess what I would try to do is try to think about all the people that I'd want to reach out to or the things I'd want to accomplish. Because I think from my understanding that we have a chance. I mean, I don't know that much about Mashiach and how the world's going to be, but I think that my understanding is that we have a certain amount that we have to accomplish in this world, and that we can earn a certain amount of schasim or reward for what we're doing. But when the Mashiach comes, it's going to be a different type of living. Meaning, we're going to have a prophet. We're going to have the Beis HaMikdash. It's not going to run the same in terms of us earning the same type of reward for all the mitzvahs that we're doing, and so I guess I would try to rack up as much as I can, type of thing.
There's an awesome idea from Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. Elishev, I'm on the same page as you. She wrote me something privately here. Definitely, I'm on the same page as you. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter has this neat idea where he says, and I'll paraphrase. He says, "Kol ha'olam omer masa yavo Mashiach, v'ani omer pen yavo Mashiach." The whole world says, "When is Mashiach going to come already?" And he says, but he goes, you know what I say? I say, oh no, Mashiach might come tomorrow. Lest he come tomorrow. Does that mean he didn't want Mashiach to come? No, of course not. But I think he's echoing the idea that Mrs. Bloom is talking about, which is we're all here for a purpose. And whatever that purpose might be, we only really can develop within that journey ends when Mashiach comes. And maybe we'll get to it tonight. It's definitely one of the ideas that I was hoping to speak about tonight, which is the idea that when Mashiach comes, our free choice is in a whole different ballgame. Why is our free choice different when Mashiach comes? Because we have free choice now because God is hiding himself. And therefore, we have this illusion of reality of where, we think we're in control and we could do what we want and make decisions that are going to either be helpful or, whatever it might be. So should I do X? Should I do Y? Should I do Z? Or should I not do them? And we have, quote unquote, the free choice to do a mitzvah or to not do a mitzvah, to do a sin, to commit a sin or to not commit a sin. And we have this, we have bechira. There's no question about it. And everybody has different levels of bechira in terms of where their point of free choice is at. There's no question about that. When you think about, but when Mashiach comes and God's glory will be revealed, and we'll talk about that a little bit tonight. So there, the free choice is taken away. So in terms of reward, quote unquote, like Mrs. Bloom made a reference to, in terms of the effort that you can make where you can develop yourself, that's in the world that we live in. So I would think to answer the question of how do we prepare ourselves for Mashiach's arrival, the answer is be the best person you can be. Be the best Jew that you can be. Be kind. Keep the mitzvot as well as you possibly can. Educate yourself so you can keep them even better, etc., etc. Does that make sense? And I think to me that's what it means. Now, does that mean that we do so readily or easily or with excitement? Again, it depends on our mood, and not that we should be dictated by our moods, right? But it depends on all kinds of factors. And we hope and we daven and we pray for success. We certainly can pray for success. Okay? All right, so till now what we've basically done is hopefully gotten everybody's appetite whetted a little bit in terms of, like, we're going to talk about Mashiach, but let's take a look and see, like, just in terms of the primacy of Mashiach from the perspective of our tradition. There's a Gemara, and the Gemara is a very interesting Gemara. It's a Talmudic teaching, and the Talmudic teaching comes from the Talmud and Shabbat. Would you like me to share my screen? Would it help you to look at it, see it? I'm happy to do that. Okay. Give me a moment. Let's see here. Okay, here we go. Okay, so the Talmud says like this. I'll just read it in English, okay? Rava said, I'm going to start over here. Rava said, after departing from this world, when a person is brought to judgment, you know what? Actually, before I do this, let me ask you. I'll get a little more involvement over here. Okay? What do you think? Okay, so we believe in the afterlife. We believe that our soul, has a responsibility. And therefore, when a person dies, we hope after 120 years of a successful life, when a person dies, their life is going to be examined by God. Right? We all believe that. We don't believe in St. Peter and the pearly gates. Okay? But we do believe that Hashem is going to ask us, or his angels are going to ask us on his behalf, what did you do with your life? So what kinds of questions do you think God is going to ask? You're up, guys. What kinds of questions do you think God is going to ask?
Can I answer?
Sure.
Okay, so I think that Hashem is going to ask, do you think that you lived your life to the fullest? Ask if you helped other people. Ask if you adhered to Torah and mitzvot. I think he's going to ask, what ways did you think you could improve if you could have gone back and done it again? Just to kind of get a feel for where you self-report.
Okay. Anybody else? Sifara Malka?
Yeah, like, isn't there one thing where I've heard where God's going to ask, not like, why weren't you more like Moshe? Why weren't you more like you?
Okay, famous Hasidic story, right? Or the Bzusha, where he says, how come, Avi Stewart, how come you weren't Avi Stewart? You were supposed to be Avi Stewart, right? Okay, good. Somebody's texting me privately. How did you spend your free time? What did you learn? Okay. Anybody else want to chime in here? Okay. So let's take a look at the Gemara, okay? Because I think the Gemara is fascinating. Because the Gemara doesn't really say much of what you guys said. Now, why doesn't the Gemara, you get to see everything over here, hold on. Why doesn't the Gemara actually say that which you said? Let's take a look. Amar Rava. Let's get that out of your way. So with regard to the same verse, Rava said, after departing from this world, when a person is brought to judgment for the life he lived in this world, they say to him, in the order of the verse. Okay? Question number 1, did you conduct business faithfully? Okay, that's question number 1. Did you designate time for Torah study? Did you engage in procreation? What does that mean? Did you engage in procreation? Did you try to have children? Okay. Now it doesn't mean did you have children? It means did you try to get married and have kids? Okay. Question number 4, and this is why I'm bringing this up here. Did you await salvation? Did you await salvation? I want to show it to you in Hebrew as well. Here it is in Hebrew. Tzipita liyeshua. Okay, you see the highlights? Tzipita liyeshua. Did you await salvation? Did you hope for salvation is probably a better translation, okay? This translation is from Sefaria. Maybe some of you are familiar with Sefaria. But I would have written, Tzipita Yeshua, did you hope for salvation? Now, the truth is that one of the sources that I looked at this afternoon from Rav Kook talks about why does the Gemara say Tzipita Yeshua? Why didn't it say Kivita Yeshua? Do you guys remember the last time I gave a shir? No, it wasn't the last time, but I gave a shir about resilience one time for you guys, and I spoke about how it says Kaveh el Hashem, Chazak v'amitzlebecha v'kaveh el Hashem, which means hope to Hashem, and then strengthen yourself, and even when things are still not going well, so continue to hope. Kaveh means to hope. Tzipita means also means to hope, but obviously it's a different verb. So Rav Kook comments on that, and I think he says from what I understood, and I need to look at it a little bit more in depth. It's kind of related to Elishava's question of like, what did you do in your life to get ready for Mashiach? Okay, that's what it means. By the way, this particular teaching from the Talmud, it has a lot of meaning to me personally, because on my father, those of you that know my family personally, my father passed away about 5.5 years ago, and one of the things that it says on his gravestone is Tzipa Yeshua, that he hoped for salvation. Now, I don't know exactly why my sister chose to put that on there. I can't tell you exactly why. I need to ask her. But that's one of the things that stood out about my father, at least for some of my, for some of my siblings certainly felt that way. I don't know, to me, I'm not sure exactly why. I need to ask them and check in with them. But it's one of the things on my father's headstone, and therefore it does have a lot of meaning for me. And so when I was thinking about tonight's topic, obviously this Talmudic teaching came to mind because hoping for salvation is a reference to Mashiach. Now, I just want to say as an aside, those of you that have either a Christian background or have a Christian education or whatever it might be, we're a little bit at risk here, okay? Why? What's the risk over here? The risk over here is that like many Jewish concepts that are truly Jewish concepts, the Christians adopted them and then changed them, and their changes are not necessarily our view of what the concept is. So when we talk about the Mashiach, right? Clearly, there's a difference between the Mashiach. One of you was asking earlier where when he'll be born, where he's born, to which family he's born. That's a very important point. He's born to a mother and a father, right? Mashiach is a human being, as opposed to being born to a god and a mother. Right? It's certainly not a Jewish concept. Thank you, Michal, for your comment. Maybe. But to be mitzapah Yeshua, to hope for salvation. So that's what really just got me. Like, what does that mean, and how do you go about doing that? That to me is kind of the most interesting thing. So part of the topic tonight certainly is that, and part of the topic is like, what does that mean the Mashiach is coming? So I would like to share the second part of tonight's topic, which is it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor from a certain rabbi. His name is Rabbi Schwab. Okay, Rabbi Schwab gave a very interesting metaphor about Mashiach that I think is somewhat instructive. He said it's an analogy. He said like this: in order to appreciate like what we're missing without Mashiach, to help us appreciate the importance of making an effort to bring Mashiach through our behavior and our actions. This is Rabbi Schwab from Neve, probably related, but I don't know. Okay, there's a rabbinical family named Schwab. His son, Rabbi Schwab, passed away a number of years ago, but the one who I'm quoting. But his son is in charge of the Beis Yaakov in Denver, and I believe he has another. I think he has a brother in Israel, which is probably the one you're speaking about. Okay. So Rabbi Schwab gave this analogy, this parable, for our state of being without Mashiach, and for the unawareness of the situation that we find ourselves in. Because imagine you're at a wedding. Everybody is well dressed. The band is playing. The photographers are snapping away. Smorgasbord is wonderful. Everyone is having a great time. But there's one thing missing. Can you guess what the one thing missing is, guys? The bride is missing. She hasn't shown up. No matter how attractive the surroundings, most of us realize that a wedding without a bride is nothing. And so a world without Mashiach is a wedding without a bride. The only difference is we don't even necessarily realize that the bride isn't here. This was Rabbi Schwab's analogy for just in terms of motivating, like giving us a picture. Like what does it mean? That, in other words, for our lives, like, what are we really missing out on? How we say we want Mashiach to come, but what does it mean the Mashiach isn't here? It's hard for us to know because we never experienced Mashiach. So therefore, by using the analogy of the wedding without the bride, we start to get a sense of, there's something really important here, that no matter how wonderful our lives are, and no matter how much Torah we have, and how much spirituality we have, and the Rebbitzins that we have, and the Mrs. Blooms, and the Mrs. Gertels, and the friends, and everything wonderful in our lives, all of that being said, the bride hasn't shown up to the wedding. So there's something that's really missing. And the truth is that the centrality of belief in Mashiach is one of the cornerstones of Judaism. We're all familiar with the song, Ani Mamin B'Emunah Shalema B'Viat HaMashiach. I believe with complete faith in the coming of Mashiach. V'Afal Pi She'yitmameh, even though he may delay, in Kol Zeh Achakelo, nevertheless, I hope for him. V'Chol Yom She'yavo, I anticipate every day that he will arrive. Very poor translation. I don't know who wrote that. I hope that he's going to arrive every single day. My brother-in-law shared with me that the Lubavitch Rebbe used to say a person should live their life every day, hoping Mashiach will come, but plan for their life as if he will not come. Why? What does that mean? Because if you plan for your life that he's going to come tomorrow, then you'll spend all the money in your bank account today, right? You can't live your life like that. You live your life with your reality. Your reality is your reality, and you live your life according to do the best that you can. You hope that the reality gets even better, and that's really our reality today, isn't it? We deal with Corona, we deal with riots, and we stay home or do whatever we have to do. We maintain our social distancing, and we wear our masks, yada yada. It's so wonderful to see nobody's wearing a mask on this Zoom tonight. But the reality is, you live your reality, and you hope that reality is going to change sometime soon. Now, with this line, I believe with complete faith in the coming of the Mashiach. Where does that come from? It comes from Maimonides. Maimonides formulated 13 statements. Actually, the truth is, if I'm not mistaken, that the 13 statements that we have in the Siddur about the 13 beliefs of faith, the Rambam actually himself did not write those 13. The Rambam, Maimonides, wrote 13 essays of belief, and then somebody else came along and shortened them to 13 statements. So the Rambam did write about these 13 core ideas, but he didn't actually write the 13 as we have them in the Siddur. I don't think so. Nevertheless, they are summaries of what the Rambam writes in quite a verbose way. I shouldn't use the term verbose. He covers all the territory he feels like he needs to cover, but you should know that the language in the Siddur of Ani Mamin, it doesn't necessarily come from the Rambam himself. And we talk about principles of faith, we have 3 or 4 general principles of faith, don't we? We believe, number one, in God. We believe that he gave us the Torah. And we believe that he has divine providence, meaning he is aware of what goes on in the world and he controls and manipulates the world according to his liking. And possibly number 4, though some say it's part of number 3, is that we believe in the concept of reward and punishment. Reward and punishment includes reward and punishment. It includes Mashiach and includes Olam Haba, the world to come. Okay. The truth is, having a shir about Mashiach without Olam Haba doesn't really make sense, but that's what we're doing tonight. Okay? Otherwise, it's just too much territory to cover. Olam Haba, the world to come, is a period of time that takes place subsequent, after Mashiach. So the Rambam, I just told you that the Rambam didn't write it as we have in our Siddur, but he did write it in his commentary on the Mishnah, in his introduction to the 10th chapter of Sanhedrin. The 10th chapter of Sanhedrin deals with issues like Olam Haba. In fact, it's called Kol Yisrael Yishlam Chelik Olam Haba. It's called Kol Yisrael, that every Jew has a place in the world to come. Now, the Rambam, the reason why I bring it up is because these 13 principles of faith, although they can be summarized as 3 or 4 principles, but you can break those 3 or 4, you can expand them to the 13 of the Rambam. So what does the Rambam write in his commentary on the Mishnah, which is kind of an elaboration of the idea that I believe with complete faith that Mashiach is going to come? He writes that one must believe that Mashiach will be better and greater, more honorable than all the kings have ever been, based on the prophecies of all the prophets from Moshe until Malachi. Now, a lot of what we know about Mashiach comes from the prophets. And if you're going to do a full study of Mashiach, so we'd have to study the psukim, the verses in the prophets. We're not going to do that for tonight. Again, this could be a course or a book. It's not necessarily a one-night class. One who doubts this or does not appreciate his greatness denies what is written in the Torah. The Torah testifies of Mashiach explicitly in the prophecy of Bilam, which is the book of Bamidbar in Numbers, chapter 25, verse 17, with the Ramban, and in Parshas Nitzavim, also according to the Ramban's understanding. Then the Rambam writes in another source that anyone who does not believe in the Mashiach, or anyone who does not wait for his arrival, is denying the validity of the Torah and the prophets. Okay. That's pretty heavy stuff. Basically, what he's saying, that in order to believe in Judaism, you have to believe in Mashiach. And without it, then you're not a full-fledged practicing Jew. There's a book written by a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Yisrael Miller called What's Wrong with Being Happy? He addresses our obvious question of what makes belief in the Messiah, in the Mashiach, such a fundamental principle. And he writes as follows, and I'm going to quote. The Chassam Sofer, that's a rabbi from Hungary from around the early 1900s, I think, maybe a little bit before that. Chassam Sofer asks, Mashiach will certainly come, as the prophets and the Gemara tell us. And denying Mashiach's coming is as great a transgression as denying the existence of Shabbat. But Shabbat, or any other specific commandment, is not on the Rambam's list. If the Rambam's 13 principles are those beliefs without which Judaism cannot stand, why include Mashiach as one of them? It's a good question. Why is Mashiach so central to the belief system of Judaism? In theory, if there was no Mashiach, no ultimate redemption, God forbid, and if he would remain among the nations serving God, fulfilling his mitzvot forever, if someone mistakenly believes that to be true, has he left the core of Judaism? Mashiach is a truth and an important part of Torah, like Shabbat, and so many other parts of Torah, which the Rambam does not include in the 13 principles. What makes it an ikar? What makes it a fundamental principle? Everyone hear the question? We're trying to understand why is Mashiach so important to us. So he says like this. The general principle is that all of us live life on two different levels. We are tested each day to see if we choose to do what is right. And we each pass or fail the tests to a greater or lesser extent. That's what we were talking about before. Each day, regardless of what we do, God takes what we have created and what we have done and what we are, and he finds a way to use it all to further his plan of goodness for the world. We don't know all the details, but we do know that no human life is wasted, no suffering is meaningless, and everything that happens is somehow fit into God's plan. Even if you recognize that you are here on earth to perform mitzvot and pass tests, if you mistakenly believe that life in itself has no ultimate purpose, it's only a game, there's no other reason for suffering or death, no plan or purpose in all that occurs, that you may be performing mitzvot, but what you're doing is not Judaism. Have any of you ever heard Rabbi Rietti speak? Rabbi Jonathan Rietti? He's got this shtick that he likes to do. When somebody asks a really question, he yells out, 10 points for Gryffindor. Right? That's his shtick, right? So if your view of Judaism is there's different houses, right? There's Gryffindor and Ravenclaw and Slytherin and Hufflepuff, and nobody wants to be part of Hufflepuff. Not just made fun of half of you, no, right? If that's your view of Judaism, where you're just trying to get more points for your house so that the Jews can win, so there's something lacking obviously in that, isn't there? So that's not Judaism. So says Rabbi Miller like this: consider the enormity of the Holocaust, followed by the emergence of the state of Israel. Contemplate the resurgence of anti-Semitism, even in countries without Jews, like Poland and Japan. Follow the amazing career of Yasser Arafat, who came to power and lost power half a dozen times, each time miraculously making a comeback. Look at all the ups and downs of the past generation, like Vietnam, Watergate, Iran, the Soviet collapse, intifadas, hippies, race riots, energy crisis, Corona. No, he doesn't say that. And a million other changes. Do you believe all that has no purpose? That God just lets it happen without any reason? If so, the Rambam tells us you missed the boat. In other words, divine providence and Mashiach are connected hand in hand. I know it's all part of the plan. And even though I don't know all the details, and it's taken longer than I anticipated, I know it's all but a series of steps leading to the coming of Mashiach. This is how he answers this question. So let's see if we can summarize. How is he answering our question? Why is it that if you reject the concept of Mashiach, you're denying the validity of Judaism? Because rejecting the concept of Mashiach denies the validity of God's plan in the world. That's basic Judaism. That's not just a detail. that's the essence of Yiddishkeit. That's the essence of Judaism. That's how I understand what it is that he's saying. Does that make sense to you guys? You guys have any questions? I've been talking now for a while. You're welcome to chime in, comment, add, take away, ask anything you like. I know it's a little bit heavy. Go ahead.
Okay, so my question is, wow, I have a lot of questions. So in terms of, wait, can you repeat the last thing you said? Because that's what.
Yeah, for sure. That the reason why Mashiach is so central to Judaism is because Mashiach is the culmination of the purpose of the world. So it's not just I live my life and I try to be a good person and I do the best that I can using the framework of the school rules called Torah and Mitzvos.
Okay,
But no.
sorry, I remember my question.
Go ahead.
Okay, so my question is that in terms of in the future, once Mashiach comes, then what? Do we have any kind of indication? Are we going to have to wait for Mashiach to give us a prophecy about what the future holds? Because as we know, Hashem, he will be, and, he was. So the whole point is that it's really, things to us look linear. They look like they're in a timeline. But to Hashem, they don't look like they're in a timeline. So, so what's the continuity after?
Okay, so I think there is going to be continuity after, right? But the continuity after is, and even though from Hashem's perspective, maybe Mashiach already came, right? Wrap your mind around that one. There is a timeline, and which includes Mashiach coming, and then Olam Haba, which is the ultimate purpose of the world. We're going to talk about that a little bit in a couple of moments, okay?
Okay.
Do you have any questions about what we've been saying, just more specific to that? So basically, we shared two powerful ideas so far. Number one is that Mashiach coming is something that we hope for, but we also know we have to prepare ourselves for it. And number two, the belief in Mashiach is central to Judaism.
So would you say that people who don't believe in Mashiach, or I know there's people who are a little bit more skeptical, so would you say that they're, is it important, how they say we're responsible for each other as Jews? Is it our responsibility to say, hey, you know what, did you think about Mashiach today? Because, that's kind of weird, but at the same time, is it really?
Right, it's an interesting question. I have found in my own experience that sometimes people will ask questions about, let's say, Mashiach or Olam Haba or whatever it is. Meanwhile, the question that's really bothering them has nothing to do with Mashiach or Olam Haba. And so sometimes the question that's being asked, it's verbalized, it's articulated, is not the question that's actually sitting on the heart of the person. So when it comes to somebody saying, I don't believe in Mashiach, I'm not sure, I do, I don't think we need to try to convince them. I think the best thing we can do is love them, care about them, and educate them. Because I think it's just coming from a lack of education. And I don't know that you need to educate them specifically in this area of Mashiach per se, but I think it's just about, living your life as a Jew and what that looks like and how to go about doing that.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Any other comments or questions before we move on?
Rabbi, I have a question. Can you show us the thing on the screen again?
What I just read?
With the questions that we're going to get asked when we get to...
Oh, yeah, sure. Let me go back up to it. How about I just put it into the chat? Can I do that?
Yeah, if you can do that. Yeah.
You want just the questions, right?
With the Hebrew and the English, yeah. If you can. If not, that's okay.
I'll copy and paste it to you, and then you can do what you want with it, by putting it into Word or something, okay? Can you send me a text, chat, and send me a chat, and I'll respond to it, okay? Okay, so we're gonna move on. We're gonna move on to something that's kind of. Oh, let me see if it lets me. Oh, it doesn't let me do it. Too big. Can I email it to you afterwards? Okay. All right. Okay. Don't forget. Okay. We're gonna move on to something which is kind of obvious. So we all daven. We all pray. Sometimes we pray well, and sometimes we don't pray as well. Sometimes we pay attention to the words. Sometimes we don't pay as much attention to the words. But if you look at the Siddur, certainly Mashiach seems to be important, doesn't it? In our siddur, we have in the Shemona Esrei, which is basically what real tefillah is the Amidah, is the Shemona Esrei. So we start off with Tikab Shofar Gadol L'Cheruseinu, what's called Kibbutz Galios, which means we ask Hashem to bring in the ingatherings of the exiles. I think anybody who's a thinking person realizes that this has already started. I don't know that we're 50% complete, right? Because I think there are probably as many Jews outside of Israel as there are Jews in Israel, give or take 1 million, right? So, but certainly, someone like my mother, who was sitting across from me, remembers, the Russian Jews. Many of us remember Russian Jews going to Israel. Many of us remember the Falasha. Is that how you pronounce it? I think so. The Jews from Ethiopia coming back. Jews from Yemen coming back. Jews from Morocco, from Iraq, from Iran, from all over the world coming back to Israel. Obviously, all after 1948. So certainly the Kibbutz Galios, the ingathering of the exiles, certainly has begun. It's not finished, but that's certainly a precursor. And it's interesting, in the order of the Amidah, that's step number 1. And afterwards, we say, Esemach David Avdecha Mehira Tatzmiach. May you speedily cause the offspring of your servant David, the Mashiach, to flourish, and enhance his pride through your salvation. Okay? And then comes Binyan Yerushalayim, the building of Jerusalem, because that's the order of events. Talk about a timeline again, right? That's the order of events. Now, I want to point out, just as an aside, especially it's a very, very powerful idea, and even if you remember nothing else from tonight, I encourage you to remember what I'm about to say. My brother-in-law actually reminded me of this tonight as well when I discussed this with him. And there's an idea from the Arizal. Do you know how we say in this bracha? We say, Ki lishuascha kivinu kol hayom. We hope for your salvation all day long. So he said, the Arizal says that, I think it comes from the Arizal, but a very valid source says that if you say, Ki lishuascha kivinu kol hayom, that we hope to you all day long, and you have kavana, and you have intention, that there's something that you're having a difficulty with in your life, whatever it might be. I'm not saying it's a miracle cure, okay, to someone who has a degenerative illness or anything like that, right? But if someone is going through a situation, maybe they need a shidduch, maybe they need help with their child, I don't know, whatever the situation might be, okay, parnasa. So their own personal gullus, their own personal exile, is the suffering that they're experiencing on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis. If they have a kavana, if their intention is Ki lishuascha kivinu kol hayom, that you ask Hashem for salvation when you daven those words, and you have a specific geula, a specific redemption in mind, every time you do it, you have a very serious, significant, intensive concentration. So when you do all that, there's a special segula. You're familiar with the word segula? A special a way of Hashem responding to our tefillos in a special way in that, when you do that. So that's, I don't know if I'll do it for Mashiach coming, okay? But even though some say that you should just daven that Mashiach come, and even if Mashiach doesn't come, but that way you daven for all your difficulties, because when Mashiach comes, our difficulties will be over. But that's an idea on Ki lishuascha kivinu kol hayom. We hope for your salvation all day long. So certainly in the Amidah, where there's 3 brachos dedicated to the concept of Mashiach, that's obviously, if those who organize the Amidah, which are the Nevi'im, the prophets, and the Anshe Knesset Agdol, the men of the Great Assembly, which were the people who prepared us for Gullus, because they're the ones who bridged the time of the temple, the Beis Hamikdash, and the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Obviously, Mashiach is, you see from our davening, you see from our tefillah, from our service, from our prayer service, that Mashiach is central to who we are as Jews. And then, of course, you have the famous Kaddish. What do we say? Yitkadel v'yitkadesh shemei rabbah. This comes from the Nusach Sfard. We say, exalted and sanctified is God's great name. In the world which he has created according to his will. So may he establish his kingdom, may his salvation blossom, and may he bring soon his anointed one. So Kaddish, which is like the highlight of davening for many, many people, and a very, very powerful prayer, which of course is only said when you have 10 men, when you have a minyan. So that Kaddish, according to some Nusach, according to some certain versions of it, Mashiach is central to it. Okay. I want to give a sense, and this goes a little bit to Nagin. Am I saying your name right? Okay. This goes a little bit to what she was talking about as well, which is world history and the purpose of creation, and why Mashiach is so important. I'm just picking and choosing what I want to share with you tonight, because there's so much here that we're not going to get to everything. Let's talk about. I apologize. I'm not going to talk about what I just said I would. Okay, but let's talk about instead the idea that we mentioned a little bit earlier, which is, what the reality of the time of Mashiach. Okay, we said before that Judaism maintains that the purpose of man in our world today is to deploy our free will, is to make good choices of good over evil. But we mentioned earlier that in Messianic times, when Mashiach comes, so God's presence will become clearly apparent to everybody, almost eliminating the necessity to choose between conflicting alternatives. So it seems strange, here's the question that we're going to work with. It seems strange to hope for a time when the opportunity to exercise full free choice will be greatly diminished. Does that make sense? Like, why would you want to do that? Like Mrs. Bloom just said, if I know Mashiach is coming in 3 weeks from now, then I'm going to make sure that I can use the time wisely. So then why do you want Mashiach to come? That's kind of the question. So the Ramchal, that's Rabbi Moshe Chaim Lutzato, in his book called Derech Hashem, he writes like this. God's purpose in creation was to bestow of his good to another. And those of you that have studied any Jewish philosophy, this is kind of Jewish philosophy 101. Okay, 102. God's purpose in creation was to bestow of his good to another. His wisdom therefore decreed that the nature of this true benefaction be his giving, created things. Apologize for this translation here. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu basically created a world that he can, and people to whom he can give of his goodness. Obviously, that goodness comes at a cost, because if it was for free, it wouldn't be worth very much. And therefore, man must earn his perfection through his own free will and desire. And if obviously it was necessary to be given free will. In order that God's goal best be achieved, the highest wisdom decreed that a man should consist of two opposites. Okay, that's why we have our guf and our neshama, we have our body and our soul, because we have this competing interest even within ourselves. And we're constantly battling, between the two sides. The age of Mashiach, though, is a time of great spiritual awareness. One of you kind of asked something about this earlier, right? You asked about spiritual intensity, people dying. I don't know about people dying, but yeah, it's a time of great spiritual awareness and less physical drive. So doesn't that take away the purpose of our existence? Again, that's another way to ask the question which we just asked, which is, why do we hope for a period of time when we will not have free choice? And especially, let's make the question even stronger. The Ramban writes in Devarim, chapter 30, verse 6 in Deuteronomy, that in the era of Mashiach, there'll be no reward for choosing good, because there'll be no desire for evil to overcome evil. So doesn't Mashiach seem to contradict the purpose of our world? So there's the Sachat Shav Rav, I think, the Rabbi Shmuel Bornstein, in his commentary on Parshas Eikev in his book called Shem Yishmuel, he asks this question, that since there'll be no opportunity to earn reward once the Messianic era begins, and yet the time for receiving a reward for the mitzvot we do today will also not have arrived, meaning that the person gets rewarded in Olam Haba, the world to come, what's the point of the era of Mashiach? And so it's not a time to earn reward, or even a time to receive reward. Let's just elaborate on this last question, because it's a little bit of a new idea we haven't shared yet. The ultimate reward, the ultimate goodness that God will give us is not in this lifetime, it's in the world to come. Okay, so where are we going to be rewarded for all the mitzvot that we do, guys? In the world to come, Olam Haba. When is Olam Haba? By the way, there's a lot of mistakes people make about Olam Haba. Olam Haba is not Olam HaNeshamot. When a person passes away, your soul goes to a place called the world of souls. I'm not saying there's no reward there. There is certainly connection to God, and it's a wonderful place to be. without a doubt, especially, if a person is a righteous person. But the reward that a person actually gets for doing mitzvot is not there. That reward takes place in a place called Olam Haba, the world to come, which is after the Messianic era. So Rabbi Bornstein is asking, so hold on a second. The world that we live in today is a world of opportunity to make something of yourself and to gain the reward that you're going to get in the world to come. The world to come is where you're going to be rewarded with everything that you deserve. And then the Messianic era in between is pointless because you can't earn more reward because you have no free choice and you're not going to be rewarded. So then what's the point of Mashiach? How's that for a question? Okay, that's a strong question. So here's the point really that I wanted to get to tonight. And I'm going to quote to you from an article by Rabbi Nussin Weiss. The article is called "Do We Want Mashiach Now?" And it's on H.com. By the way, those of you that read Mishpacha or get Mishpacha, there was a wonderful article that gets to the same idea by Rabbi Lopiansky in this last week before Shavuos. Okay. Arlene, did you have a question? Okay. So he writes like this. We need a little background to fully appreciate the oddity of considering the coming of Mashiach fundamental to Jewish faith. Judaism does not subscribe to the belief that man can be redeemed or saved by anyone, including God. God put us into this world to redeem ourselves by exercising our own free will and choosing the good and rejecting the evil. The whole point of our existence in this world is that the conditions prevailing here make it a suitable environment for human independence. God's presence is not manifest here. Consequently, we are able to choose freely without being overwhelmed by its oppressive weight and earn our reward in the world to come by perfecting ourselves through our own efforts. 1 second again, okay? I'm not sure if you're raising your hand, but 1 second.
Oh, sorry, there was a fly.
Oh, okay, no worries. Okay. By the way, according to Jewish thought, the arrival of Mashiach has nothing to do with the world to come or the concept of reward. The maxim the Talmud teaches that mitzvot cannot be rewarded in this world applies to the days of Mashiach as it applies to any other historical era in this world. For the post-Messianic world as described in the prophets and in Jewish literature seems ill-suited to the exercise of free will that is the sole point of living in this world. Okay, so he's basically repeating the question that we just asked. So let's rephrase the question. That the purpose of Mashiach is to live in a perfected world. So the Ramchal writes that something which is pretty interesting. We think about what's the purpose of life. How many of you are still in college? Okay. What's the purpose of going to college? Getting your degree, right? That's the reward. Is there any other purpose in being in college? Is it education? Possibly? Okay. Rabbi Alderstein would say, Rabbi Alderstein says that Rabbi Ralph Pelkovitz used to say, excuse me, that we live in a world of of communication without connection, a world of knowledge without wisdom. Rabbi Alderstein added on a world of degrees without an education. Okay. It's not true for everybody, I know. But I don't know about you, but when I was in college, it was half and half. Unfortunately, most of the teachers thought it was more about the degree than about the education because they didn't bother educating, right? You know what I'm talking about, those of you that are still in school. Okay, so the Ramchal says in another sefer of his called Das Tevunos, the Understanding Heart, that reward and punishment are not God's ultimate objective. It's not about getting the degree. It's not why God created us. That might be like our perspective, but rather, what is it? Universal perfection of the world. He says there'll come a time when man, and he's quoting from scripture and the sages, from the Torah and from the Gemaras, etc. There'll come a time when man is divested of his free will, and there'll no longer be evil in the world. And if so, it's not reward and punishment that is the goal of creation, but rather the universal perfection of existence. So all of a sudden now, we're starting to get a little bit of a window into what Mashiach is about. Mashiach is about, I'm afraid to use the word tikkun olam, okay? But Mashiach is about a perfect world, the perfection of existence. The Maharal writes, the last 2,000 of the 6,000 years of history are the days of Mashiach. But you asked me earlier where that's from. I see now it's a Gemara in Avodah Zarah, page 9a. This means that towards the end of time is the most appropriate time for the arrival of Mashiach and for the Messianic era to take place, because the end is the completion. In other words, he says, Mashiach will bring the entire world to completion. The entire world will be united to the point where the whole world will be complete and perfect. Therefore, it's fitting that the King Mashiach, who will complete and perfect everything, will come at the end of time, the appropriate time for completion and perfection. And finally, and maybe I'll end with this because I think we've been talking for a long time already tonight. Okay, this is a quote from Rabbi Yitzchak Berkowitz. But if you look at the Rambam and Maimonides, and if you look at that article Mishpacha this past week, here's the yesod, here's the foundation of Mashiach. The foundation of Mashiach is that even though the arrival of the Messianic era will curtail our free will and entails a sacrifice in the growth that we can still achieve, nevertheless, we want it for the sake of God's glory and honor. He says like this: after redemption, there'll be no challenge, since the clarity will be so great. We're not asking for Mashiach to cover our overdraft or to settle our dilemmas. Or, I would add, we're not asking him to solve our problems, although he might or will. The answer is that when we ask for redemption, and again, going back to hoping for redemption, we ask for redemption for the sake of your name. Geula leman shemecha. We say that in Rosh Hashanah davening. So that everybody will recognize Hashem. There's a desecration of godliness right now by the fact that God is not recognized by everybody. That the man has a lack of awareness of the Creator. And so asking for Mashiach has an element of sacrifice for us. We'll be giving up a lot of joy. The joy of choice, the joy of challenge, the joy of self-growth. For whom? For Hashem himself, to reveal himself. Now, obviously, that's something that's very, very powerful and needs elaboration. But I think we'll end there for tonight, and then we'll take questions. And what we're going for here basically is simply this. Mashiach needs to come for Hashem's sake, not for our sake. I'll say that one more time. Mashiach comes for God's sake, not for our sake, because that's why God created the world. So we might ask, why do we want Mashiach? The answer is, we don't want him for our sake. We want him for Hashem's sake. Because when Mashiach comes, the vision and the perspective, not the perspective, but the vision, the idea of why God created the world in the first place will come into fruition. And of course, we want God to fulfill that purpose. But I would add that it also has very much to do with our relationship with him as well. Because our relationship will change to a point where we can celebrate his perfection and his goodness in a way that he meant to. And when we do that, that in and of itself is the reason why he created the world. So it's not just about God doing it for him, but it also does enhance our relationship with him as well, just in a way that's different than we're used to. Okay, let's leave it there for tonight. I thank everybody for joining us, and I'm happy to take further questions. Like I mentioned, though, okay, there's 1,000 questions which I have not answered, but I'm still happy to take your questions, and then we'll go from there. Okay, just raise your hand, unmute yourself. You can chat. I probably missed some of the chats.
Okay, so my question is, you said it's for God's sake. You said that's one of the reasons for the perfection of the world, but isn't it something that we learn in the 13 principles that Hashem doesn't need our mitzvot? He doesn't need any of the thing. We need them, and it's beneficial for us, but Hashem doesn't need us, because that would kind of like negate the part of him being Hashem. So
right. Hashem is, I think what you're asking is, and if I cut you off too soon, let me know. I think what you're asking is, Hashem is perfect.
Yes.
So Hashem doesn't need us. So what does this mean? That's true. That's true. And at the same time that that's true, God created the world for a reason, which ultimately is to bestow his goodness upon the world. In order for that full goodness to be given, so then that perfection of God has to be visible in the world. That can only come about when Mashiach comes.
Thank you.
Sure, my pleasure. Any other questions? Feel free to chat or just speak up. My understanding is that our free choice will be limited, and again, you asked me that by chat. It's much more limited because it'd be moronic to go against him when you see that perfection in the world. Okay. If anybody else has any questions, I'm happy to try to answer them. I can't promise you, Juliet, will you just text me your email, and I'm happy to send you that as an email, okay? I don't know if she's still here. Mrs. Bloom, can you text me her email and I'll send it to her? Okay. All right, thank you everyone for coming for tonight. I really I appreciate the opportunity, Mrs. Bloom. It took me a little while to get going here and wake up, but Baruch Hashem, all's well that ends well. And thank you for the members of the Westwood Kehillah that have joined us tonight. And as always, Michal, thanks for joining us. Okay.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Good sharing. Wonderful to see you.
My pleasure.
And
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Have a wonderful night, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye. Say hi to mom.
I'm right here.
Hi.